Rick and Morty has done it again. They got everything wrong. With this show, people either love it or hate it. I've not really seen much in between. I get why. It's because it offered something unique with its sense of humor. It's a lot of absurdism, which either pushes people away from the show or draws them to it. It also has a pretty offensive sense of humor. When you consider the type of people that are drawn to absurdism and offensive humor, well, you can see why most of the criticism is about the fans rather than the show itself. I hear so much criticism about the fan base, and this is the part of most Rick and Morty videos where the copy pasta starts playing, so I'm gonna cover my ears.
To be fair, you have to have a very high IQ to understand Rick and Morty. Humor is extremely subtle, it's not a subtle theoretical physics.
You saw the title of the video. You're probably asking yourself, what did Rick and Morty get wrong? An episode that was crucial for me to think that the writers knew what they were doing. Over the past few seasons, the writers have been shifting gears, becoming less episodic and trying to focus more on Rick becoming a better person. The issue is, a large part of the plot has centered around Rick looking for revenge, and the two in tandem haven't really been packaged well. Rick's progress has been very slow, but sometimes the show blames him when he isn't the issue. They create problems to pin on him, and it can really skew the viewer's perception of where he's at. One episode that does a pretty good job of messing everything up is Air Force Wong. The episode starts out with Rick in therapy. Right from the get-go, you can tell the writers are trying to paint Rick as a terrible person. This is evidenced by the fact that he is eating Funyuns. Since the beginning of the show, the writers have done a pretty good job showing that Rick is not a good person through the way he talks to his family. But in this episode, he is really rude from the get-go, more so than usual. He's not passive-aggressive today, he's aggressive. The president calls Rick and he doesn't answer, so he shows up to his therapy session and drags him to the state of Virginia. Here we are reintroduced to an old character from season 2. Unity. Now at this point, it's really important that we go all the way back to when this character was introduced in season 2 to understand the full picture here. Going back exactly 50 episodes to autoerotic assimilation, Rick is exploring space with Morty and Summer when they come across a distress signal. They go to the ship where they discover aliens that have been taken over by a hive mind. Rick, however, has had experience with this hive mind in the past. It's Unity. They used to date. They catch up a bit, talk about what they've been up to since they've last seen each other. Unity used to control only a few thousand people. Now she controls an entire planet, and it's functioning so well that they are now a candidate to join the Galactic Federation. She's really put her mind towards her work. However, Rick hasn't changed. Aside from reconnecting with his family, he hasn't really done much at all. Rick and Unity hook up again, have a few drinks, and from this point on, it's pretty clear that they are bad for each other. They end up progressing to hard drugs, and up to this point, Rick has been the bad influence, making every bad decision on the spiral down. However, this is where Unity takes charge. She encourages Rick to make hard drugs, and they go on a bender together. She evacuates a city and bombs it, just to get a rise out of Rick. She's literally destroying her hard work for fun. Meanwhile, Morty and Summer are now in danger, because when Unity is drunk, everybody in the hive mind is drunk. She loses control of a few people who immediately begin to riot. Unity tries to make sure Morty and Summer are safe, but they are far from it. When they get back to Rick, they make it clear that they think Rick and Unity are unhealthy for each other. Rick starts proving it by being very dismissive and rude to them, telling them to just go home and that they suck the life out of everything. Unity is more sympathetic, but she isn't quite swayed yet. By this point in the episode, we have a pretty clear idea of what Rick and Unity do to each other. Rick is always letting loose and doing pretty much whatever he wants, so it isn't like Unity is making him do hard drugs. Although she did convince him to neglect his grandkids in favor of drugs, it isn't like he's clean anyway. Whenever Rick is with Unity, he can't control his ego and emotions. He pushes away his family and loved ones because there is someone to keep him company, somebody he can relate to because they are just as powerful as him. Inversely, Unity has strict guidelines for herself that she follows to a T, so she can accomplish her goal of taking over solar systems. She wants to be successful, and staying sober seems to be the only way she can do that, but that doesn't stop her from envying Rick's wild lifestyle. Whenever she's around him, she can't help but cut loose. She escalates things pretty quickly and her work suffers for it. They are terrible for each other, and Unity is the first one to realize this. Unity writes Rick a note, breaking up with him, which is a horrible way of doing that, so Rick goes home and attempts to end his life, which shows us just how dependent on this person Rick was. Rick still tries to reach out to Unity, but she makes it clear that he is cut off, and eventually he learns to accept that. Given just how bad these two people were for each other, it's good that they cut each other off. However, I do know in some instances when someone goes to rehab, they are heavily encouraged to cut off anybody who would cause them to relapse, such as dealers or peers. For all intents and purposes, the writers did a great job with that episode, showing how poor the influence those two had on each other was. The writers showed that those two shouldn't talk anymore, but still, they brought her back. Back to season 7, Rick is very upset that Unity is on his planet controlling millions of people, And he has every right to be, because she agreed not to. Unity becomes upset with Rick because he designed a chemical that removes her from anyone it touches. If Rick was going out of his way to hunt her down with it, maybe he'd be in the wrong here. But he's only using it to protect areas he promised not to be. A big problem with this episode is who it is trying to paint Rick as the bad guy against. It's hard for the audience to empathize with a hive mind colony that enslaves people over a human being. Rick goes back to rescue the president and Dr. Wong, but he gets cornered. Dr. Wong was released from the hive mind, and she tells Rick that she believes that him and Unity should chat things out. We learn the reason Unity came to Earth is because she is worried about Rick. Rick says that what he does is none of her business, but she disagrees. I'm on Rick's side here. If you cut someone off, you forfeit your right to tell them what you think about how they are living their life. You can hope they're doing better. In fact, that's the right thing to do. But if you quit supporting someone with problems, you can't just show up to their house and say, hey, you've got problems. She is lecturing him without being willing to take on the weight of being there for him. Man, I feel like I have to preface the rest of this video by saying, Rick is not a good person. I don't think he is. It's just that everybody else is worse here. The president puts a dome around the state of Virginia, trapping everybody who's connected to the hive mind. All signal is cut off between them and the hive mind, therefore cutting them off from their host. They still have whatever is making them a hive mind, they just aren't connected to a host. Unity does all the right things here while on call with Rick and the president. She lets them know that a host could take over the hive mind, and she'd be willing to release them herself if they lowered the dome. I don't blame the president and Rick for not trusting her after she took over an entire state. Rick declines the offer and says he'd rather deal with the situation himself. And he's not being irresponsible here, because on paper he has all the tools to deal with this problem safely. They have the antidote and everyone infected is contained within a dome. Rick isn't responsible for the president deciding he should take over the hive mind then take over America so he could have a high enough approval rating to win re-election. We do get scenes here where Rick snaps at Summer because he is under a lot of stress. The writers do their due diligence to try and paint Rick in the wrong, but I really just can't see it here. The president starts taking over the country, and when Rick realizes it, he saves Dr. Wong so she can help him convince Unity to save them. They have a very interesting interaction here.
He's going to assimilate the Earth faster than I can fight it.
And you want me to talk to him?
There's no talking to him. No human mind can keep itself together while controlling millions of people.
So where are we going?
I need Unity's help, so you need to convince her I'm worth it.
You aren't.
So lie.
I don't need to tell this to anybody who's gotten their bachelor's in psychology, gone through 2 years of a master's program, done 3,000 hours of surveyed practice, and passed the licensing exam, because Lord knows those people know way more than I do. But if you're a therapist, don't say that to a patient. I am not criticizing therapists. I am criticizing Hollywood writers that think they are therapists. They cannot write a good therapist character. They are the ones that give therapy the negative stigma that it has. Ignoring previous episodes and just looking at this one, here's what Rick has done to Unity. He got mad at Unity for breaking their agreement to not colonize anywhere on Earth with their hive mind. He told her that since she cut him off, he no longer wants her to check in on him and worry about his business. And he told her that he doesn't trust her anymore. He communicated his feelings. Not perfectly, but maturely. Considering how Rick normally talks to people, he did a good job here. And he's not unreasonable for having the feelings he does. They get on the ship and Unity is very unreceptive to any communication with Rick at this point. Again, that's fair. These are two people that cut each other off. I don't expect them to enjoy having to interact with each other. Rick asks Unity to fix the issue, but she doesn't want to. Rick tells her that she shouldn't have dropped in unannounced and taken over a state. To which Unity responds, I called you multiple times. Call me crazy, but if I call somebody, whether it be once or multiple times, and they don't answer, I don't break into their house. There are better ways to do a wellness check. Unity said herself she has ears all around the universe. She could have heard from someone else that Rick was alive and well, even though he was pursuing a dangerous goal. Maybe they retconned the last 5 minutes of the last episode she was in, but she ghosted him first, which was a good thing for her to do. They were bad for each other. She cut him off and later he followed suit. Why is Dr. Wong telling Rick that he's in the wrong? Rick did tell her to lie if she needed to save the world, but I don't think that's what she's doing here. Even before they got on the ship, Dr. Wong was expressly not on Rick's side. She says that Rick's response was hostile enough to cause a huge issue, but the problem was more so a lack of response, which is perfectly okay given the fact that, I feel like I've said this once or twice, they cut each other off. Dr. Wong does convince Unity to free Earth. The way she does it is full-scale invasion. Then she has to focus her mind and free everybody in America. The process hurts her, and she does the right thing by agreeing to go through with it even though it causes her pain. After this, Rick says he trusts Unity now, but she doesn't trust him. They go their separate ways, and Rick is upset because he caught feelings for her again, but their bad history is something he has to deal with. Rick then listens to the voicemails that Unity left him, and she does let him know that she is going to stop in Virginia. but that doesn't make it right. She colonized a state of 8 million people to get Rick's attention, and acted like he assumed that risk instead of her. What she did is probably grounds for a stalking charge. If Rick listened to those messages, he could have stopped her from doing what she did, but she still was the one who did it. The episode ends with Rick and the president reminiscing over their mistakes. At least there was one good thing about this episode, Keith David, my beloved. For an episode where Rick is supposed to be the one in the wrong, he's a better person than he usually is. All the writers really do to show that he's the one in the wrong is make him a little angrier than usual. When he's talking to Unity, the person he actually has a problem with, he communicates his feelings, and while he's not exactly polite, he's not insulting her. Another thing is, Rick is willing to swallow his pride and ask Unity to save Earth. Usually he would just use his portal gun and go to a different timeline. He's now putting effort into solving his problems because he cares about the people around him. He's supposed to be the bad guy here, but this is probably his best showing so far. The formula for the show is Rick can't help but change his behavior that pushes everyone away. They've written it well in the past, I don't know why they couldn't do it here. They've been working on Rick's character development for 3 or 4 seasons now. This episode kind of threw me off from it, and I no longer think it's going to be executed well. I now care less about the story overall. But hey, I guess the benefit of TV show releases now being few and far between is the fact that they release 3 to 4 hours of content a year. So I'll check out the next season. Do me a favor and hit the subscribe button before you head out. And if you want to watch my character analysis of Amber, it's right here.